Okay, we'll get started. Thank you for coming. I'm Steve Weiler. Matthew Ismail is right here. There's a bit of irony potentially associated with a session like this. Had we done this as recently as 5 years ago, it would have been a short session on short books. But now, we need a long session on short books because a lot has happened in the last 5 or 10 years. There's a lot of activity in short books. And in fact, there's some an irony in this, another bit of irony in this, in the sense that there's a lot of attention going now to the next phase in the digital monograph. And the projects, largely sort of supported by Mellon, justifiably get a lot of attention. But an equally interesting parallel activity going on now, in some cases at the same locations, principally the University of Minnesota Press. And the short book is the sort of the partner of the new digital monograph in trying to reimagine what scholarly books might be like. So this is, in many ways, a new subject that in the past few years has gained a lot of steam and vitality. But it's not only in scholarly publishing. This is a photograph that appeared in a story in the Times last week, about 10 days ago. And the Times, the headline the Times gave it was "Tiny Books." Now, I forget the exact name of the
Tiny houses.
What?
Like tiny houses.
Like tiny houses, all right. But this is the illustration at the front of a piece on Dutton's efforts to import from the Netherlands a new format for publishing fiction. And the illustration is meant to give you a sense of how small this first new set of books will be when they come out in a couple of months. Here's the Times piece, because I want to show you what these books look like. Now, none of the scholarly books we're going to talk about. And by the way, we have PowerPoint, but we put everything that's in the PowerPoint, is altogether 4 or 5 paragraphs of prose, on a handout. So I'll just put them at the front and the end. You don't have to write anything. So the handout has all the quotations and a sheet of references, the things we'll cite too. And we have some books to show you. This is show and tell. When do you see that anymore? So we brought samples of several of the series of short books. So you can, afterwards, you want to look at them, see what they're like. That's fine with us too. But here's the piece from the Times, because the piece actually, as the Times does these days, the Times uses a good deal of video. They're trying to use more and more video. But look at what they, this is what those books look like. You read them horizontally, and they're printed on onion skin kind of paper. And they're about as thick as a thumb, is the way the Times describes them. And presumably you can hold it in a hand. What is it supposed to mimic? The scrolling on a screen. Now this is, horrible if you think about it. And now print is being forced to imitate the screen. This is crazy. But they're phenomenally successful in the Netherlands. They haven't gotten outside the Netherlands because the only printer and publisher who can manufacture them is a Dutch printer. So Dutton has a contract now with this Dutch printer to produce the first 4 in this series. Now, who knows if the next round of short books or small books is going to look like that. It's hard to imagine this format serving the purposes of scholars. But we've had a lot of surprises in the last few years, so that's what's ahead.
Can you read them on a bike?
Some 18-year-old will figure out how to do it. Guaranteed, I think. But the key to it is the spine is like an indent, it opens a lot. And the idea is you should be able to do it with one hand and scroll it. Now, I'd like to read Middlemarch that way.
Right.
All right. Anyway, I just wanted to note that the idea of the short books is getting a lot of steam in the trade world. In addition to, we're focusing exclusively on scholarly books. So what I want to do is just go through this subject in just a few categories, beginning with the defense of the short book. And what I want to lean on, believe it or not, there's a lot of good writing about short books. And I'm glad Susan just walked in, because as I mentioned earlier, the University of Minnesota Press is supporting not just the publication of short books, but a lot of good writing and thinking about short books too, which is another part of this activity. And they're the best at this. And Susan knows that this actually writing about the short books has a surprising history to it. And 50 years ago, William McClung at the Princeton University Press published a piece in the first issue of the Journal of Scholarly Publishing. It's a short article on the short book. And it's amazing how much he anticipated about where we are now with it. So this is a few sentences put together. And what he considers here is the economics of the short book in this piece, and then something more important, and that's what I want to focus on here. The essential criterion for academic book publication should be significance. Now, I'm doing just what I can't stand when I see colleagues at the university standing in front of a PowerPoint and reading it. But that's all I'm going to, it's just this one paragraph. The essential criterion for academic book publication should be significance, not length. If this principle prevailed, books of all lengths would be published. The pace of publication has produced readers. Now look at this. This is 1969. The pace of publication has produced readers who read quickly, skim, and select. It's incredible how people were complaining even then. But this is scholarly reading he's talking about. The small book can be read, and this is the great point he makes, the small book can be read as a unit at a single sitting as a singular and coherent intellectual experience. An ideal form of expository writing probably maximizes the richness of content within a length that can be absorbed by the serious reader under ideal circumstances in a single period. That's a remarkable statement about scholarly cognition, and about adult cognition generally. And what he hits on is about the 2-hour cognitive space that a small book can occupy. And that's the way he establishes a definition of the small book. He sees it from the perspective of a reader, not the publisher, really. So McClung is way out ahead on this score, largely because he's willing to put aside the economic questions on behalf of the cognitive, and you call them sort of professional ones associated with scholarship. What's amazing, you'll see this in a minute, how contemporary observers of the short book find pretty much the same point. This 2-hour space and focusing on what readers do. McClung does one more thing. He cites an article in this piece from the head of this SSRC, the Social Science Research Council, from the same year. Both of them are interested in how the structure of graduate education helped to fix the standard monograph at its 200 to 300 page length. And McClung's complaint is that we're doing this out of habit, that's all. It's just a set of conventions. Nobody sort of has ever taken a step back and said, well, how about 80 pages? How about 100 pages? How about 100? It's all thesis driven. And it comes from the requirement of the PhD thesis, which was supposed to mimic the digital monograph, the old-fashioned print monograph. So he asked, how did we get in a spot like this? But it's back, he said we have it backwards, and not thinking about length more flexibly. So he does a great job, this is 50 years ago, he does a great job, I think, in defining and defending sometimes he calls them small books, but short books is the more common reference. But again, I'm distinguishing between the economic dimensions of it and what I call the intellectual ones, and that's what he focuses on, and that's where I think most of the attention should go. Now this is 10 publishers of short books. It's not everyone, but it's most of the major players. Now it's led by Oxford University Press's very short introductions, 500 titles since 1995. I have one here. I'll talk to you about it in a minute. But there's a bunch of other. Prickly Paradise, some of you may know, they're still thriving in Chicago under the leadership of Marshall Solomon, retired for years. They have a loose affiliation with the University of Chicago, but they're sold by the Sam Co-op on the campus. It's sort of the housing for them. They're famous. Well, they were, not as much as they. But then these are the major, the primary publishers. And there's a lot, these are leading presses experimenting in various formats. They do different things. The lengths are different. For Oxford, stipulates 35,000 words. That's the very short introduction. So 35,000 words and 120 pages. And they're incredibly consistent in that they rarely go much under or much over. And everybody, I want to say a word about Cambridge, everybody else is between the 35,000 that Oxford stipulates and the 20 to 30,000 that Cambridge is putting in. Now, Cambridge is the most recent player in this field with a new series called Elements. Everyone else is sort of at, 20, 25,000 to 40,000 or about. There's no hard and fast rules, and you can see from the samples here, there's different I wanted to show you, here's another problem in definition. MIT Press publishes a series called Essential Knowledge. Now, this is a small book, but it's not a short book. So you have to be careful. Some of the essential knowledge are, but this reads pretty quickly. You can read this in about 2 hours. But MIT doesn't make a claim being a short book publisher. That's interesting to me. But it's small. It's about the same size as the others. In any case, I wanted to skip ahead to Cambridge because you can define what I think, myself, think are where the best work is being done and where I'm afraid to say where the dangers are. A lot of the dangers reside in what Cambridge is doing now with its new Elements series. Cambridge decided to enter this last year. They've now put on their website a lot of information on what's called Elements series. They've published about 57 so far, but they're all over the place. Many different subjects, different lengths. They kept the same format. They stipulate 20 to 30,000 words and 40 to 75 pages, and they have a long explanation for authors about the advantages of publishing in this format. They claim to be flexible, peer-reviewed, lots of metadata. They're open access, they're all open access. And they promise visibility, they'll promote the books, and they're updatable, and they can carry video and audio. Now, a number of these things Forerunners and the others can't offer. But Forerunners can offer a coherent intellectual idea of what they're doing. Cambridge is just out of control. No one seems to understand what a series looks like, except try to publish as many things as you can on as many subjects as you can. And here's a good example. This is from the current series. They have some that look like Oxford or Forerunners or something. There's a very good one, for example, on Kant's social thought. It's about 75 pages, and it corresponds perfectly to what McClone is looking for. A young scholar, written a book of about 80 pages. It's not an article, but it's obviously not a book. It's terrific that it found a home with Cambridge. It wouldn't qualify for Forerunners because it's not, I'll explain something about Forerunners later. It doesn't represent this, what Minnesota identifies as great literature. It's not work in progress. It's a finished piece of work, but it's at an odd length, so Cambridge has it. At the same time, this is what's confusing, or what I think is misleading about what they're doing, they have a title called Dinosaurs, a Catalyst of Critical Thought. Sounds just like Oxford's very short introduction. Wrong. It's part of a series they're doing with the Paleontological Society. They've got a dozen books they're doing that are associated with undergraduate teaching in the field. So what this is the opening day lecture from an undergraduate course in paleontology. It's for an 18-year-old. It sounds like a very short introduction, but it's nothing like it. And it's only 26 pages, but it's called a book. I don't see, I mean, it's not, there's no way it got to 20,000 words. So those are just two examples from the long list, which goes in every crazy direction. They all look alike, they've designed them alike, but I think they're just trying to build a big list quickly, and here's the gimmick. They're selling them, they'll print them on demand. The idea is to sell them as a package to libraries. So the more they can get in there, the higher price they can get, and that's how they get into libraries. And I don't like that. But I'm not a librarian, but that looks to me what the strategy is for them. But I regret that they haven't been as high-minded as you would expect them to be. In any case, I want to use that as the two polls. Matthew's going to talk about the ATG books. Okay, just a word about reading short books. This is from a piece by Catherine Schultz. It was in the New Yorker last year. It's in the, you can take the references there, you can find the citation. Catherine Schultz is a well-known, well-established New Yorker writer, and she set out about 18 months ago to read a sample of the Oxford very short introductions. There are over 500 of them. She poked around, read about 15 closely, and another 10 or 15 she skimmed them. And this sentence is perfect. This is pure McClungism. Look at this. This is last year. Looking at the very short introductions, it strikes you that if you had to have a flight from DC to Cleveland, you could be well on your way to mastering the basics of microeconomics or medieval Britain by the time you arrive. Not quite 2 hours, but close. And she's absorbed the sort of McClung idea of what a short book is supposed to do, but she's very good at showing how consistent in voice, in layout, in intention the very short introductions are. Her favorite of everything she read? Priceless. The very short introduction to teeth. Now you're laughing. You're laughing. It's a masterpiece. She is. I have one. I would have said the same thing. It's brilliant. It's funny. It captures precisely what the very short introduction do. It takes an unexpected subject, in this case, and brings you into the subject in the most intellectually honest, scientifically adventurous way. Who knew that they were supposed to say about teeth? But this archaeologist who's been studying teeth for his whole career really understands why we should all be more interested in teeth, and so on. So it's a terrific example, and I thank her for pointing this out, but they all look alike. They have like Rothko-like covers. You can see, but what struck me is that, there's a long piece in the New Yorker. What she does is associate. She does something a little like what Minnesota does. She's trying to figure out, what does this represent intellectually, the very short introductions. And she associates it with the movement towards the encyclopedia in the 18th century. She looks at the whole project, the very short introduction. This is a very smart way to look at them. As what Oxford is doing is creating a contemporary encyclopedia. Very different from Wikipedia in this regard, but not so different in some ways. And now nobody's going to read all of them, so on, but the intention, that's a very smart thing to say about what Oxford is doing. Again, defines the difference between Oxford and Cambridge in this regard. Oxford doesn't bill itself as doing this. They don't have to. I think she's made a great point here. Oxford's, by the way, brought the VSIs up to date. There's a website. They have study guides to them, and a lot of, more apparatus than they had when they started. Okay, last section before we turn, and this is just on right. So we looked at defining and defending short books, publishing short books, reading short books. Just one more paragraph on writing short books. This is what makes the Minnesota approach so different. They are trying to also conceptualize what short books mean for scholars and for authors. This is a big step, and I think probably the most important thing to come out of this movement from the scholarly side. And here's a couple of sentences from a piece by Danny Kasperzak and Terrence Meyer, who do the Forerunners, partially the Forerunners Project and Manifold at Minnesota. They say transforming authorship means encouraging authors to become increasingly comfortable with releasing their writing before they've perfected it. What a heresy in scholarly life. That's an incredibly bold thing to say. It's the complete opposite of what the Chicago Guides to Writing say. So this is very bold to make this point about writing. We're thinking about gray literature and iterative works, texts that are often little farther along than fresh ink. Look, an image. Beautiful, okay. Or our first steps in a long chain of later related efforts. The big picture isn't wholly fleshed out. The trees in this forest are just saplings. Some will grow tall and strong, some will be pruned away, composted. I don't know what some of the authors felt when they saw the last line there, but it was a bold thing to say. Everybody thinks, oh, I'm in the, I'm going to grow up tall, but there's going to be some composting. Here's what Forerunners looks like. They're genuinely short and small. But the point is to intervene in the workflow, in the scholarly cycle, in a way that nobody else is talking about. So the work emerges from blogs, from all other things, and it's a step in a scholarly career here in taking up a subject. It's a very different conception of what a small book is all about. It's very, very important for us. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Reading more books, and Matthew's going to take over and give us a more in-depth look at a single, with a local example, what ATG is doing. You got the, you got that? All right. Which one do you push? This one. This one? Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah, I'm basically going to talk about a single series that we conceived about a year and a half, 2 years ago. That basically came from the fact that, and we're talking now about business books, books you read about, things in management and how different practical subjects like that. How it is that every time I read one of these business books, I think this is a third content, 2/3 filler. This is a 180-page book with 50 pages of content. You read this in reviews over and over again. You see this in your own experience. And I thought, times are changing. Our capacity to publish is no longer restricted to what some big publisher says you must do. let's just try to publish books that are appropriate to the length of what you want to say. Let's just publish books that only need to be 12,000 to 20,000 words. So, I think a lot of publishers make the books 180, 200 pages because if you want to sell a paper or a hardbound copy for 25 bucks, you're not going to get that for a 50-page book. I don't see a lot of other reason or other ways to explain why a whole genre of writing is bloated and has too much content for the amount of content that they have. So let's think about how we can publish things that are appropriate to the length of what we're doing. So I came to Katina, and Katina's always kind of open to new things. Let's do it. So she's interested, and we thought we'll create a series that is for people in the information world, librarians, publishers, different kinds of vendors, and we'll do the kinds of things that are of interest to them at the length that's appropriate, and go from there. We decided that rather than produce books in a scholarly style, we would do it more in the style of quality journalism. So rigorous thought in a more relaxed presentation, so it's more readable. Be 12,000 to 20,000 words. You would have citations at the end, but not throughout the text, if possible. And we decided eventually to make them open access, partly because, if we're going to publish these, you've got to get your money back. Trying to sell them for $5 a piece, that would be tough to make your money back that way.
Make it up in volume.
You got to get volume.
You make it up in volume.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, isn't it? So we make them away, and now we're looking for sponsors, so that Katina doesn't lose her shirt. And we went then to look for partners, and we went to Michigan Publishing. We've got a good Charleston Conference connection there, as Anthony Watkinson's son Charles is the director of the University of Michigan Press in Michigan. And we know that Michigan Publishing is developing Fulcrum, an open access book platform. They are quick to press and quick to publication, so that we're not waiting for 2 years to get each book out. And in the first year, we produced 4 volumes. Now, the 4 volumes were one on reading in a digital age, about a topic that Steve is interested in, the impact of digitality on reading practices and understanding. One of them was on library marketing. One of them was on, how can I forget? I read them all 12 times. Yeah, library publishing and peer review, thank you. So they were not only about libraries, they were also about peer review, libraries as publishers. And working with these books, it was the perfect length. It was perfect length for the material at hand. Now, the technophobes goes true. Aha. So one of the things about brief books from the perspective of a librarian, they've always been a problem. Books that are not a standard size have always been a problem. I mean, look at this. If you want to shelve these things and keep them in order, and you want people to find them, this is in the old print days, right? It's a disaster. You don't know what any of them are without pulling them out. If they get out of order, you have to take them all out because you don't know what any of the numbers are. If you take one out, one of them gets pushed back, and then it's caught between them and you can't see them. So say short books to any librarian, and they don't like it. It makes everybody unhappy. This makes everyone very happy. Right? This is a nice long book. You can see the title, you can see the call number. This is what everybody wants. Nice long books that are easy to shelve, easy to see. Nobody has to worry that they're going to get lost. And if it's too short and you don't want to deal with it, put it in the pamphlet file. In which case it basically disappears. Now, I had assumed,
What was the end? One more slide.
now I assumed, we're talking about ebooks, right? You can buy a print copy if you want to, so they're OA, or rather, print-on-demand books. So any of these can be purchased as a book with all the inconvenience of a short book if you do. So I assumed this is not exactly the most radical thing in the world. It's a brief book. It's appropriate to the length. We're not compressing ideas and making them into something that's no longer appropriate and it becomes unreadable. Sometimes the very short introductions are a bit hard, I think, because sometimes they compress things and it's hard to get to them. In this case, it's really, there's no problem. None of the authors had any difficulty meeting the requirement of 12 to 20,000 words. So, just as an example of what happens when you publish short books, the practicality of it becomes strange. I took a lot of time with these things. Each one of these, I planned the entire series. I worked with Katina and Jason Coleman from the University of Michigan Press. A lot of work went into just planning the thing. How would we set them up? How will we use fulcrum? How will we, what will be the means of distribution and so on and so forth? What is the subject? How are we going to get the authors? How will we make sure that the subjects are appropriate to the Charleston Conference audience, which is not just librarians and not just publishers? So, all of that, then working with the authors, making sure they understand the project, making sure they understand how we will approach this. It's not a big book, it's not a little article, How are you going to approach this? What's the appropriate length? How do you, working with their first draft, getting that first draft to a peer reviewer, working with the authors, with the commentary from the peer reviewer, getting that revised article to Michigan Publishing, making sure that they have time to work through the text and get it set properly. If there are problems, to give us time to get back to it so it's available when we want it to be available. It's a lot of work. I got another job, it's not something else. So, interestingly, my library has something called the book recognition event. And it's basically, if you wrote or edited a book, not an article, but a book, in the previous year, you can enter these into the book recognition event and they will recognize you and let the provost shake your hand and all these other things that make your day. And I entered my 4 briefings. And I came a couple of days later and knocked on the door and he said, "These aren't books. We can't accept these." Well, it is a book. This is a book, but it's too short. It's an article. It's a book. Like a novella is a novel that's kind of shorter, right? Wouldn't accept that. And then they said, and in fact, you cannot be recognized as the editor. Why is that? Because you didn't write an introduction. So all those countless hours of work that went into producing this series, okay, I didn't take half an hour to write an introduction, but tell me I'm not the editor? No, sorry, not the editor either. And I'm not angry about this, because I don't need recognition, book recognition now. But it tells you that when it comes to short books, they don't fit. Whether it's because they're a pain in the neck to shelve, or because they're not in the right category. It's not really a book. Why is it not a book? Because it's too short. It's not an article, because it's maybe a little too long, and it's published all by itself, so it can't be an article, right? This really doesn't matter. Is it appropriate to the length of the project? Is it appropriate to the subject? And the things that Steve was showing you, this could be appropriate to a scholarly exercise as well. And it need not be a grade paper or the first look at something. You can write something that is 30, 40,000 words that is substantial and significant and sufficient to that format. So let me just stop there and ask you. Oh, sorry, Steve.
I think we got one more slide.
Go ahead.
Let me just add one of the reward system question. The longer version of this has a section on academic rewards question, which is, I'm glad you raised this. It's a serious matter. Leonard Crissuto, who writes a column in the Chronicle of Higher Education, you may read on graduate education, did a piece on the rise of the mini monograph a few years ago. And he focused mainly on the reward system question. He called around to chairs of history departments, literature departments, and they all confessed to saying that the short book probably wouldn't do it at the research university. So he said they would be cautious about advising young scholars to do it. When I saw that, I did a little study of 3 of the short book publishers, where I have a student who was willing to help me on this, and we discovered that the vast majority of them were done by people with tenure. Probably no surprise. It was people who, we looked at the Berkeley Paradigm, Forerunners, and one other. And we also looked at reviews, by the way, in library holdings. We found that surprisingly high level of library holdings. We have a large number of short books in our library, for example. And there's some reviewing, not as much as standard monographs. So that was a surprise, too. But the most interesting was we confirmed with Crissuto, in the sense that it's largely senior people who are doing it, who are the risks are low. It's not exclusively so. So what it would take, this is a feature of the reward system generally, that it's going to take scholars themselves sort of waking up on this and changing how they see things. The provosts don't care about this, and most people misunderstand. The reward system is in the hands of the faculty. That's all. The faculty can decide what constitutes a book, but it would take a brave faculty now and some real leadership in a department or a professional association. If the MLA got interested in this, or more likely the AHA, got interested in this, we'd probably see some change. But they don't, they don't associate themselves because they don't typically pay a whole lot of attention to. Yes, you're going to.
When you said association, I appreciate this presentation so much. I'm Rachel Chance. I'm an acquisitions editor with the American Library Association.
Yes, yeah.
And we have a short book series called Library Futures.
Right.
It's anywhere from 15 to 30,000 words. I wish I brought examples. So it's for a professional audience, but we're also hoping to see crossover. We're doing, the first topics we've done are resilience, anonymity, blockchain.
Wow. I'm sorry I didn't have it on this list. It shows you I didn't have a complete list.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
Okay.
I wish I saw this and marked it on this has been a great presentation. And we're getting, it's edited by Miguel Figueroa, who's the executive director of the Center for Future of Libraries. I'm the editor who works with him on it.
Right, yeah.
And we've had a blend. We've had some scholarly people, and what you're saying rings so true. It's either very senior scholarly people, and we have to whip them to not use citations on every page. But we also have anonymity was written by two young women.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say young women, but they are much younger than me. But they've first-time writers. They've written blogs before.
That's a different way to look at it as a point of entry, which is what Minnesota is doing.
Right.
Yeah. I
Right.
think, again, that's why Minnesota has a different view of this. What they see here, the short book is a location for rethinking scholarly work and academic locations. And, you know, if we have to wait for the MLA to get to this, it's going to take a while. Let me show one more slide, and then I just wanted to end with one more comment. Again, McClung, he's fabulous on this. This is from his essay from 1969. We need only a modification of our concept of the book to open up an enormous range of new possibilities. Perhaps the fastest route to this new consciousness would be the publication, effective promotion, and intelligent review of some first-class, paradigmatic short books. We have them now. So we caught up with his article from 1969. It would just take a sort of a campaign of a kind to sort of promote this idea. And oddly enough, this could be a great resource for the scholarly community right now to do something like this. And maybe it's an ATG function. I don't know where this could land. But anyway, I just wanted to finish the slides, man. The slides, right? We want to risk not using the slides. You don't know how long it took. This is like 2-year-old slide level, right? But you know, if I got it in, you're going to see it. All right, sorry, now go back to your question. I'll come back to you in a second.
Okay. Well, I think that example also lends to the, now for nearly a decade, Morgan Claypool, one of the big HCI publishers in they've made huge advances in STEM and in, you know, general thematic books, short books, 104 pages
Right.
max, and on a wide range. But they've also done creative marketing to sell it, not only as ebooks to start out and print on demand, but also as subscriptions and packages, as well
Right,
as
yeah.
also, and now
Several of these presses operate in the same way. That's why the series idea
the series.
carries the power. But everybody's thinking digitally too. That's the.
And now publishing is another example
Right.
of social sciences and
I gotta get
science.
some of this from you. Don't go away.
So it's huge. It's growing.
When I said my list was incomplete, I was being very modest. Yeah. You wanted to finish up? Yeah.
Just very quickly, so we do a book on each trend, pertinent trends
Right.
that Miguel has picked out, and one of them is short reading. So we're going to be doing a
Oh.
short book on short reading.
I love
What
that.
about
Yeah.
me? That would be good.
That's terrific. So that's the ALA series. The proceedings version, I'll get all of this in. Yeah.
The question, do you or anyone know what the economic model is for the, say, the Oxford Very Short Introductions, in terms of what they're paying advances for authors?
I don't know about advances, but they're making money on the series. They sold, I can tell you how many they, well,
And they
the
sell
sales
for
are very
$7,
good.
$7 a
Yeah,
piece.
no, they're $10.95, $11.95, something like that. But they've got, I don't have the version in front of me, but they translate. The key to that, they sell a lot of foreign.
Yeah.
To translate it to 39 languages, so they have a big worldwide audience. But I don't know what what that figures in Oxford's.
So Morgan
ledger.
Claypool sells them, I just found this out yesterday because I did a negotiation on it. For a library to have the ebook series, it's $100 a piece.
Oh.
So that's for perpetual ownership
Right,
in
right,
the E
yeah.
version.
But you can see, I mean, the logic
And
of the
that's cheap in
series,
the science.
which is an old strategy by now. I mean, the series didn't come with short books, but the series applies especially here. What bothered me, though, is Cambridge seems to want to exploit the idea, and I think in a very unwelcome way, yes.
It all reminds me of something like John McPhee writing in the New Yorker.
Yes.
Who writes something like the
Right.
Birchmark Canoe thing, or
Right.
the Oranges book, which he then takes and publishes
Right.
as what I think you're talking
Right, and
about.
there is
short
some
books.
history to this, yeah, yeah.
And I wonder if there's a crossover to some of the more lengthy journal pieces.
Yeah, but it's John
Telling
McPhee.
this stuff.
I mean, the New Yorker, a lot of them New Yorker writers,
Yeah.
Calvin Trillin operated the same way
Exactly.
for years. But that's a very small group of writers, and you'll often see these
Well,
Jewish.
it's also not really scholarly in the
No,
same
that's the thing, it's
sense.
McPheeism.
Yeah, yeah.
It's Roger Angel-ism. It's a good example on the show, on the newsstand now. Judith Shulevitz has a very long piece in Atlantic this month on Alexa. It's really about voice technology. It's close to being a show, it's quite a long piece. But it's Atlantic can do this now, and it's Judith Shulevitz. I mean,
It's
she's
not
got.
footnoted.
What? No, it's scholarly journalism, which is another way of addressing the vocational and professional problem.
Exactly.
Because that's what the forerunners look like. they're more scholarly than, than an Atlantic piece or the New Yorker, but they don't look like a standard scholarly book. And it's an invitation for a scholar to think in a little different way. So that's where the stakes are high in this. And that's why I think McClung's approach is important, and why some of the models are really pushing us in this direction. But I tell you, it's someone who works, I teach at Michigan State, I'm a regular faculty member there. We're one of a number of institutions who are making grants for scholars to publish in the new digital format. And I was in a meeting a couple of months ago, and I look around the room. Now, I'm old enough now. I've been through it. I've been in a number of English departments, other places, and I know what's going through the minds of my 30-year-old colleagues when they talk about digital publishing. Every one of them, they want a dust jacket, man. They don't want a digital book. They don't want a 50-page thing, and so they have to tell their mother it's online. This is great, but you can see it in the behavior. They want something that looks like that, and it's got to have a dust jacket, and otherwise it's not really a book. So these are the young people. I mean, it doesn't matter, but it's continuing. It's generation to generation, and that's the point that McClung makes, too, in 1969. It's the cycle of scholarship. Everybody's socialized still in the same way. And I don't know what it'll take to break that mold. One way to break it, by the way, and I pointed this out, there are very few scholars here. Very few. The conference needs to find a way to bring more faculty members. Do a panel with the association directors or something to put some pressure on them, to show them what your world can help them to do in widening the sense of academic vocations. Because I can tell you from very few scholars across pay much attention at all to what goes on in scholarly communication, but you have a lot to tell them here. I wish it could get through. There were others wanted to say something? I cut you off. Yes.
So are any of these available as audiobooks now?
Oh wow. Not on forerunners. I mean, it's a natural for an audiobook. As a podcast. It's a natural because of the length. Brilliant. Let's set up a little business. We can do that. We also don't say anything more. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it later. No, but that's really it's an obvious choice, but I don't think any of the short book people make the audio book possible. But that's
But look
There's
at
a
the
29
publishing
minute
list,
book
that's the
company.
problem, because books from audio are usually in the trade.
yeah.
The
Very
list
few
that you-
university presses do them. We'll look at
I
it.
think we're supposed to finish now.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Thank you for coming.